Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is simply discerning what is true. Today is November, that is the 8th day of November 2025. I'm going to be reading a book that Phil Langdon suggested for me to read, Psychology and Kabbalah. This is chapter 18 called Identity. So we're going to go to the particular chapter here and read about it in Identity. In the first 2 years of a bodily growth and development of the psyche, we can observe how an individual learns to live within physical limits as they gradually extend their sensor motor range of action and cognition. By the 13th month, most babies can stand up, and a few weeks later can walk. New skills are added each day, and with them, the infant world slowly focuses into a ego-centered existence in which everything is related to what the child thinks, feels, and does. So again, this is about thinking, feeling, and action. This phase of narcissism, as it is called, is crucial because it builds up a Jasada body image that gives the individual a sense of independent existence, although this in reality is an illusion. In a child, this does not matter because it is not responsible for itself, you see. Indeed, such a egocentric egocentricity is necessary in order to find out what and where they are in relation to the otherness, as it is sometimes termed, of the rest of the world. In a so-called normal child, the transition from infant to toddler marks not only the beginning of real mastery of the body and deeper exploration of the world about them, but also a lengthening of the psychological umbilicus that holds the child to the mother. So this is talking about, in a way, the connection it once was with the umbilical cord that was with the child when it was in the mother's womb. Here, the narcissistic is the tendencies of wanting one's own way and yet needing and depending upon the mother come into conflict. Such tensions can, under certain circumstances, build up into a major crisis. One of many an individual has to face as critical points of growth. If the balance of the psyche is good, then the tree can afford to be flexible and adjust. If it is not, because the tree is too far towards the side of structure, then a harder set is made within the emotional and conceptual complexes building up there. If, in contrast, the tree is inclined too much the other way, that is, towards the dynamic pillar, then a tendency to lack of control and impulse may be seated in the growing psyche. This may, despite a docile persona, surface in later life in a crisis when regression to this earlier stage can occur in order to avoid reality. The alcoholic returning to the bottle is an instance of this. Here it should be realized that while the psyche of a child is immature at the lower face level, its middle and upper face levels are still adult. This is borne out by recollections of childhood in which people knew what was going on about them, even though they may have been inarticulate children. This adult outlook comes from the self, that is the temporal, that oversees the psyche form, its pivotal point on the tree. In most cases, memory of previous lives and their past relationship with members of their current family are forgotten. That is there because of unconsciousness. This, however, does not obliterate their reactions to these individuals. This is seen clearly in young children before they have acquired a well-developed ego to contain what they think, feel about, and would like to do to certain people. In the early days of Freudian psychology, many were shocked by the notion of infantile sexuality, the idea of a child desiring his mother sexually and hating his father or any other rival was unacceptable to the 19th century society that regarded psychology as unscientific. Today, such a view is not so shocking because we see sexuality in a climate of acceptance created, ironically enough, by Freud's work. However, what is not taken into account is the fact that the child may be expressing an adult desire through an infantile body that has not the constraints of immature ego. While a baby's body might be quite sexually inadequate, the adult psyche that inhabits it is not. So that the relationship between sons and mothers and daughters and fathers, with all their Oedipal and electral complexes, so beloved by Freudians, may be more than the infantile sexual label hung on them. Seen Kabbalistically, the infant cycle is entity halfway between two worlds. It still reacts, even if it's unconsciously, to the karma relationship it may have had with the family it has been born into, even if they had no previous relationship. Such a highly dependent position must generate a sexual attraction that is often responded to by mothers and fathers who treat them quite differently from children of their own sex. While the while this, that is, can no doubt be attributed to the normal processes of parenthood at one level, at another, it is sometimes quite noticeable how the rival or rival parent is excluded from such intimacy. As one obviously obliviously father remarked on his relationship with his very young daughter, it is like having a love affair, end quote. Many of the old taboos to prevent such things were set up in every culture because the adult element in the child has been recognized. Child seduction and incest are more common than generally acknowledged and not always initiated by the adult. The relationship between the child and its parents and the way they work out these sexual tensions have a profound effect upon the formation of the ego and its attitude towards the principles of male and female. Such factors as the male psyche in a female body, or vice versa, are bound to be an influence, as are those involving previous and present karma relationships that are to be worked out. In the figure 24, we talk about relationships here. Again, this is talking about the tree of life here. These are crucial in the conditioning of a child. If they are without any such archetype as a father, the young and even a unfulfilled adult will seek a figure who will fill this missing role in their life. This may take the form of older friends, teachers, and those in superior ranks. They can also occur in lovers and spouses where the dominant partner takes on the empty role. This principle applies equally to the archetype of family. The substance, the substitute being a gang, club, or formal institution. Besides the taste of what we call sexuality, which is traditionally associated with Yasod, both in the body and psychologically tree, in that one presents a masculine or feminine image to the world. There is a generation of identity. This is formed by the processes of introjection and projection in the form of the Yasodic faculty of the ego to perceive image or observe and inhibits from its birth the various qualities of its parents. This is seen in the Ethereum likeness to one of the other that the child takes on as it grows a personality. Certainly, there will be, particular genetically, characteristics, but what is more often noticed is the exact mimicking parent expressions and movements that reveal a remarkable level of imitation. Yeah, I think that's true. I think when you think about us talk about the voice, I know what we sound like and how we clear our throat or how we call, something of that nature is in a lot of ways very similar to our parents. We are mimicking somewhat the sounds that our parents did when they were coughing or sneezing or whatever you want to call it, type of thing, and how they had these little um, nitbits or whatever you want to call it of their personality. Clearly, to imitate a beloved person is quite natural, but so too is the tendency to echo those we fear and hate in order to acquire their power. This characteristic is part and parcel of the highly imaginary process at work in the young Yasod. So let me explain something here so to make it a little bit easier for people to understand, because I think it's critical that I share this. I think I did this before, but I think it's important that people understand what we're looking at. And I tend to have a problem trying to find it in this book. It's basically a piece of artwork showing how they've diagrammed this whole thing. And it's right here. That's what it's talking about here. You can see that. This has been shown here, and it just basically it talks about certain. You got a Miller. You have a middle pillar, right? You have the middle pillar. You have the one on the left-hand side, and you have one on the right-hand side. And what you want to do simply is you work these things out, and gradually you begin to move. Would be hopefully to be in the middle, okay, not from one extreme to the other. You see. But you need both in order to bring you to the middle. You see, that's what this is about. You see, all right. So that's the key point about the whole thing here. Is that simply is you want to be on the middle pillar. Clearly, to imitate a beloved person is quite natural, but so too is the tendency to echo those we fear and hate in order to acquire their power. This characteristic is part and parcel. Yeah, I read that. Sorry. Such interjection and projection not only go into more superficial structure of the ego, but also deep into the unconscious to form a whole series of complexes made up the myriads of tiny experiences of the world about them. Added to the personal level of identity are not only parental characteristics, but the absorption and acquisitions of a whole culture represented by the family in which they live. Thus, the little Jewish boy remembers the Passover ceremony in his parents' home with all its customs and atmosphere, which form the model for when he has a family of his own, while the little English girl will produce in later life every detail of how someone of her class entertains her husband professionally. Colleagues, grandparents play a particularly important part in the making of a cultural identity. The phenomena of the special relationship between grandparent and grandchild occurs it occurs because neither is so deeply preoccupied with life as the parents, so that they can communicate directly soul to soul. This connection is enhanced by the fact that a child is not fully incarnated, and the old are slowly discarnating, I should say. Thus, it is possible for their psyches to connect more easily, to transmit and receive at a deeper level of the family and its collective experience. The wise old man and woman in a child's life always leave a profound impression of roots and destiny. The Freudian view of infantile sexuality could be seen Kabbalistically as the period in which the Da, which is knowledge, and Yasod of the body and psyche unite and coordinate the muscle, nerve, and organ triads with the psychological action, thinking, and feeling processes. In this, the oral and anal and odava phases that are passed through from the first to around the 6th year reveal a distinct progression up the tree. That is, first the body, Yasod, or autonomic system uses the oral sense of touch and taste to explore the world. Then the body's temporal or central nervous system, that is, which is also the maku of the psyche, learns to control the anal processes in its act of will, you see. Finally, the dot and eusodic level of ego, where sexuality and identity are established, relates to the ovidai connection with the parents. The oral stage of biting or sucking the breast, which is said to generate, in deprived cases, such attitudes as sarcasm or never having enough, might, however, be considered in the light of the past life relationship. So too could the anal, A-N-A-L, battle over the potty, P-O-T-T-Y, in which the child first exerts his will against the parents, who perhaps represents an ancient conflict with power and authority that has been carried over to this life. Likewise, Odaba of boys and the electra difficulties for girls may go back to now forgotten fates that have to be worked out in this life. So in other words, this is coming back from the past and something they need to work this thing out. You see, they've had issues with this in a previous life. All that's been described of these earliest of years must be seen against this wider background of faith. Too many psychologists focus upon a particular level. The Aristotelical perspective sees the effects and the Platonists only the causes. Somewhere in between lies the most comprehensive picture. In Kabbalah, we take into account the interaction of the worlds, all the worlds, that is, even though we may be examining our one particular point of level, functions, or stage of activity. Thus, for example, the withdrawal of infantile sexuality into a state of latency is seen as the shift of emphasis from Yasod to Had. The lunar stage of babyhood, with its mother orbiting ego, now gives way to the age of Mercury, or true childhood, with its intense activity and insatiable curiosity. Here begins the coherent use of symbols that have slowly been accumulating in the infantile ego. This is when a baby gurgling moves into words and phrases, and then on to become language. Let us trace this development from its inception in order to gain insight into the Hottian process of learning. So we'll stop there, number 18, chapter 18. So, okay. Thank you for listening here, folks. I'm not going to go any much longer tonight, but I wanted to share this from Psychology and Kabbalah. Appreciate you being here, and hopefully this makes some sense to you. Again, this was done long ago in some ways. This we have to understand that this was one way this was done was simply with the area of astrology. That has a lot to do with the psychology, so to speak, of how they affect. And he about that, how the moons, the certain planets have effect upon the child. So I appreciate you being here. Hope that this makes some sense to you tonight. And let me change this thing over a little bit easier so I can see. So thank you. Again, this is Psychology and Kabbalah, chapter 18, called Identity.